Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about dynasties in college football and how maybe they're just a thing of the past. And yes, I cannot wait on the Saban era untold stories. Man, that is going to be incredible. And yes, we're firmly could be in the center of a Kirby Smart dynasty. The question is that the last one that we will see? But it'll be definitely a really interesting thing to watch over the next 5, 10, 15 years. So definitely will be awesome to watch there. But let's get into some lingering questions around the top 25 teams in the country. We have jumped through, I believe, the top 16 at this point, and then we're going to get into another six upcoming right here. So let's start with the Oklahoma State Cowboys, and the biggest question firmly is, can Alan Bowman avoid the mistakes? This has been a problem for him throughout the entirety of his college career, and the good news is he has one of the best offensive lines in the country, maybe the best. Ollie Gordon is one of the best running backs in the country, maybe the best. I think the ability on the outside at the wide receiver is really good, and it's very veteran, which is maybe even more important, frankly. But Alan Bowman is a turnover guy. Last year, he had 13 passing touchdowns. He had 12 interceptions. And I understand they made it to the Big 12 title that year. And I understand there were a number of things that happened along the way that kind of went Oklahoma State's direction. But that can't be the case this year. If they want to be successful this year, that just plainly cannot be the case because they're going to see a lot of stacked boxes. They're going to see a lot of 8, 7, 6 guys standing there waiting for Ollie Gordon to get that ball. And when he does, they're going to absolutely swarm. So he's going to be fine. Ollie Gordon's going to be able to put up numbers. I'm not arguing that, but they have to be able to scare teams down the field. They have to be able to spread teams out, and they have to be able to open up running room for Ollie Gordon to go to work because that is the crux of this offense. So overall, I mean, you look at this team and it's a really good team across the board. They have so many guys coming back. They have so much in place to really make a run at a possible college football playoff berth. But at the end of the day, there's a couple of things that he just has to do better. Now, he's going to be doing plenty of that, so that makes it a little bit easier for sure. But he's going to have to cut the interceptions. Maybe, by 3, 5, maybe even cut them half and go down to 6 interceptions. He's got to up that completion percentage that was all the way down, I believe, below 60% a year ago. He's got to bring that up to like 63, 64%. Then you can make a difference. It doesn't have to be leaps and bounds. It doesn't have to be, making every single play for your team and totally airing the ball out. He's just got to make sure that using Ollie Gordon isn't the only option on this team. And if a team can back up into coverage and pick him off every couple of drives, they're just going to have a really tough time keeping up in this league that is remarkably competitive. Moving on to Kansas State, the question I have is, was kicking Will Howard out the door a mistake? Because we all know the story at this point. Avery Johnson came in late last year, played incredible football, was an incredible athlete, especially running the ball, and then Will Howard hit the transfer portal, found his way to Ohio State. He is now the starter. The question is, do they want that veteran presence? Did they miss out on having this guy in that room and making sure that they had someone that maybe this Avery Johnson thing doesn't go quite as smoothly as they want it to? Now, I'm having a hard time arguing this because I don't think any Kansas State fan is worried about it, and I'm not worried about it one bit because I think Avery Johnson is downright special, and I think he's going to do a number of really good things. That being said, he does need to take a big-time step forward passing the ball. That was the place that Will Howard was pretty comfortably better than him a year ago, and Avery Johnson's definitely got to take a step forward there. Got to get better at completion percentage, got to be just more consistent delivering the football. So I do think it's one of those things that I don't know if it's really going to cause too much of a problem, but there's a reality where maybe Avery Johnson goes down with an injury, or maybe Avery Johnson just isn't playing all that great late down the stretch, and you need a guy that has been in those scenarios to come in and make those plays. Now, Will Howard's not a guy that was going to wait around by any means, but it is something that maybe is something to watch as we get a little bit closer. They're still trying to figure out the backup over there, so if Will Howard was there, it wouldn't necessarily be too much of an issue. But at the end of the day, it's kind of a big-time hypothetical that I don't think we'll be questioning at the end of the year, but always something to keep in mind. Moving on to Miami, the biggest question about this team is not the transfer portal guys, it's not the talent of this team because it's absolutely ridiculous. Can Mario Cristobal coach the games that he needs to coach? Can he win those big-time games down the stretch of a season? And it's going to fall on him in a lot of ways. When you look at those games towards the end of the season, in the conference championship, in the playoff, there are a lot of tactics that are put into play. There is a lot of chess matches that are put into play between those two coaches, and in a lot of ways, the coaches are the ones that win those games. Mario Cristobal has been downright bad in a lot of those big time games and a lot of those moments that you're going to be in throughout the season if you want to do what you're capable of doing. So I think it's one of those things where if you're up 4 with 4 minutes left and you have to make some time management decisions, or you have a fourth down maybe on your own 45-yard line with 2.5 minutes left, you have all 3 timeouts. Do you punt the ball away? Do you go for it? Those are the type of decisions that he has to be able to make down the stretch of this season, or they're just going to be a little bit disappointing this upcoming year. Now, another part of this is he just got to lean on his coordinators more. He has 2 really, really good coordinators in Al Golden and Shannon Dawson, and trust them. Believe that they are going to make the right decision, and I understand you got to get involved from time to time, but at the end of the day, it felt like last year he just had his hands on it just a little bit too much at times, especially late in that Georgia Tech game. So I think it's one of those things that Miami has everything on the table this upcoming year, including a national title, but the coach could be the thing that holds them back if he doesn't get some of the issues that he's had in the past under control, and definitely something that will be fun to watch down the stretch of those big-time games for Miami, even in week 1, frankly. But moving on to Texas A&M, the big question I have here is kind of twofold. Can Connor Weigman stay on the field, and then can he hit a ceiling? Because the way that NFL scouts talk about this kid is out of this world. They talk about this kid as he could be a number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft this upcoming year, and I'm having a hard time disagreeing with them. I know we have not seen a ton of that kid. I know that he has not necessarily played the amount of football that you would love to see from him, but man, the arm talent is ridiculous. He can fit balls into windows that are just remarkable, and he's one of those guys that throws with remarkable anticipation. So I understand, it's not necessarily a full case study. It's not easy to get an idea of how good this kid is after a couple of games starting and then getting injured here and there. But the talent is off the charts, and it comes down to a number of different things of can he hit that ceiling, whether it's the play calling of Colin Klein or the O-line getting a little bit better than it was last year, because that played a part in his availability throughout the year. The wide receiver depth is something that they're a little bit worried about, and then obviously him just staying on the field is the biggest thing of this. But if he hits the ceiling, this is not a team that can just win 9 games. This is not a team that can just play spoiler in the SEC. This is a team that can go to the playoff. This is a team that could possibly go to Atlanta and play for that SEC title. Now, you're walking a little bit of a tightrope, obviously, with a new head coach, but imagine if Mike Elko walked in there and took them to the playoff in his very first year, the amount of A&M fans that would be just ridiculously mad at Jimbo Fisher that aren't already ridiculously mad at Jimbo Fisher would be off the charts. But this is one of those teams that is remarkably dangerous, and you look across that roster, it's one of the most talented in the country, and that quarterback is right at the center of that. Very much like this kid, and I think he's going to be one of those that makes plenty of plays this upcoming year and maybe, just maybe, plays himself into that first round of the NFL draft. Moving on to Arizona, my biggest question here is, was losing Jedd Fisch bigger than keeping Noah Fifita? Because that's the biggest question when you're talking about last year. It was Jayden de Laura to start the season, then he wasn't playing quite well enough. Noah Fifita came in and did something that frankly shouldn't be capable of being done. This is a very young kid that was still learning that offense that jumped in and just tore people to pieces. So we know the physical ability is incredible. We know the arm talent's awesome. We know all of that is in place. We also know Jedd Fisch's offense is really incredible. We also know that he does a really good job of putting his quarterbacks in really good positions. So the question is, keeping Noah Fifita and Tatori McMillan was as big of a deal for Arizona as anything this offseason. Is that enough to make sure you get a repeat of what you had? Is the change in offensive coordinator going to be enough to really kind of change the way this team operates and change what Noah Fifita can do on the field? So I think it's one of those things that they did change the coaching staff. There's no doubt about that. But also, the coaching staff isn't dumb. They know what they saw last year. They know what he succeeded in, and I would be very surprised if it wasn't a very similar approach. I think it's going to be one of those that you just play to your player. You don't worry about what you like to run. You don't worry about what you're bringing into the job. You worry about what that guy likes to run. And if he can run just about anything. But at the end of the day, there's a world where there's a little bit of a sophomore slump because he doesn't have that guy calling plays. And it'll be a really interesting thing to watch, especially early on in the season. They play Kansas State. If things look a little bit out of whack in that game, maybe that's the reason. Maybe Noah Fifita isn't quite as comfortable in this offense as he was in the offense a year ago, and he'll likely develop into a fine player in that offense, but definitely something that could stumble Arizona early on, and maybe they can't recover towards the end of the season. Then Kansas to finish it off, and this question is very, very simple. Jalen Daniels, can you stay on the field? We have to ask this question just about every year, and it's been a negative question just about every year, but this is one that's obviously impossible to answer right now, and it's going to be a day-to-day nightmare for Kansas State fans, just hoping that they don't have any tough hits, hoping they don't see him on the ground after a play, and really hoping they don't see any tweet come across their page that says he's out for the season. He is a remarkably talented player, and one of those guys that we talk about, players or quarterbacks in particular that have the most power over their team season. You know, if you lose this guy, you're in deep, deep trouble, whether it's Carson Beck or Cam Ward or Avery Johnson. This guy's right there. He might be the number one on that list, frankly, because this is a totally different team without Jalen Daniels on the field, and he's someone that totally changes the way that your team works. And it's not just the offense. It's not just he makes that offense more explosive and more dangerous. The defense plays harder when they see him on the field because he's a natural leader, because he brings so much energy, and because he's someone that not only can he bring energy to the offensive line, to the wide receivers, to the tight ends, he'll bring it plenty to the D-line and the linebackers and all of those guys, because he's not just the leader on the offense, he's the leader of this entire team. So seeing number 6 on the field is going to be huge for this team, and it sounds like they will for week 1, but beyond that, you just got to make sure that he is on the field, and cross your fingers, hold your breath, do whatever you got to do. But for Kansas to be successful this year, that guy's got to be on the field, and he's got to be on the field pretty much every single week. Maybe there's a little bit of leeway there somewhere in that schedule, but keeping him on the field is the number one priority, and if they can do that, then this is as dangerous of a team as there is really in the country. But also you got to figure out what that backup situation is going to be. Still kind of a fight there, but it's definitely something that you don't want to have to worry about those backups. I'll put it that way. So a ton of stuff happening around all of these programs. I mean, you get into fall camp, some new questions present themselves, and that was actually the one I used for Texas, you know, figuring out what they're going to do with those running backs. How are they going to pull that off? So it's going to be a really, really interesting thing to watch, and absolutely love breaking these down, but we'll do our last segment on that tomorrow, round out the top 25, even dip a little bit below the top 25 for that one. But let's go into our last break here, and when we come back, we're going to do some fall camp intel. We're kind of wrapping up camp. There's a number of teams that are starting to kind of wind down, get into game week preparation, and there's a number of things that I want to update you on, just kind of grandiose things throughout camp that around some of the big teams in the country. So we'll break it down right after this, so stick with us.